Right, well, I've had a little bit of time now with the Switch, and what I want to do today is I want to talk about the control mechanisms and the ergonomics of the system. And the first thing I want to talk about is the Pro controller. So, first things first, let's have a look at it. It's not bad, I have to say. It feels really nice in the hand. Now, different people are going to find that they prefer it over other controllers or not, depending on the shape of their hands and how big their hands are and so on and so forth. But overall, it feels okay. The thumbsticks, they're fairly easy to get to. The button placement is good. The buttons are big, so you're not going to miss them easily. And they're spaced apart decently. The only issue I would really have with it would be with the triggers. And I don't know if you can see here, that's a digital trigger. So playing some racing games, more hardcore type of racing games, you're going to find that there's some issues there. You haven't got a graduated control, so acceleration is going to be difficult. Now, I have played the sort of racing game, the F-Zero clone that they've released for the Switch, and the acceleration's on, I think it's on the A button. And that worked okay, but you don't really need a graduated control for that. But, some games will require a graduated control. And I think it was Blunty said that with some of the back catalogue as well, if Nintendo actually ever get around to releasing any of their back catalogue, some of those games required an analog trigger as well. So that could become a problem in the future. But other than that, it feels good. It's got a nice heft to it. It's not too heavy. It's fairly lightweight. It's going to be okay over long periods of play. I think it's a decent controller. I think it compares reasonably well to, say, the Xbox One controller. You can compare it for size there. It's a little bit smaller. Obviously, I don't think it's got quite the loveliness of the design of this particular controller, or even that one there. I don't know if you can see that. Let's put that in picture. But yeah, some of the Xbox controllers are pretty lovely. But if you look at the layout, it's fairly similar. And how does it compare to the DualShock 4? Well, again, it compares fairly well. And all these controllers, basically it's going to come down to which one you find sits best in your hands. Personally, my favourite controller is the Xbox One controller. And I do like the DualShock 4 as well. A friend of mine favours the DualShock 4, and I know a few people who do. So, like I say, it depends on how you hold the controller, what sort of size your hands are. But this Pro controller is very similar to the layout of the Xbox One controller. So if you get on with that, you're going to get on with this. Apart from, like I say, with those triggers. One thing I will say is that some people have said, and I thought this was hilarious, that this compares well to this. And that, in case any of you don't know, is the Xbox Elite controller. And no. No, it doesn't compare to the Xbox Elite controller. But then again, the Xbox Elite controller is a bit more expensive, as long as you don't buy this off a scalper. This, if you're a hardcore player, and I'm not personally, I don't use it that often because I don't need its capabilities. But if you're somebody who really plays games in anger and really wants to get into it, or you're on the pro circuit or something, this will definitely see you well. But comparing it to other makes of controllers, one thing. What's more important is how well it compares to the actual Switch layout itself and the Joy-Cons. Because obviously people are going to want to know, should they get a Pro controller? And my argument there would be, absolutely, yes, get a Pro controller. If you look at the actual Switch itself, and you look at the way the Joy-Cons are laid out on here, you'll find that when you hold it, your thumbs are not naturally going into the right place. I don't know if you can see that, but my thumbs want to be there and there. They're not, it doesn't feel right. And if you compare it there, then you can see that the layout on the actual Pro controller is much better. and the buttons are bigger. And if you look, the sticks and the buttons fall directly underneath each other on the Joy-Cons, and they're offset here. So the actual controls with this are going to be a lot easier. And I actually find the ergonomics of this are quite difficult. And I found that when I was playing in bed, my hands were getting tired. Specifically, surprisingly actually, the left-hand side. I found my left hand was cramping up a little bit after a long period of play. So you might want to take that into consideration. The other thing is playing it with the Joy-Cons in the Joy-Con holder. And careful when you do this, because a lot of people put these on the wrong way round. If you put them on the right way round and you get them in, they go on like, oops, they go on like so. And again, I think you've got the same issue. The buttons, obviously, they're not going to change their placement from using it with the tablet to using it in the holder. And when you are trying to use this, if you look, I can't, my fingers, my thumbs specifically, want to be sort of here and here. This one's okay, but this one is definitely not. And when you hold a controller, there's a natural kind of way you hold it, because it kind of forces you into holding it a particular way because of the shape of the controller. And on this one, the buttons and the thumbsticks are fairly natural, depending on, as I say, the shape of your hands. With this one, when you hold it, when you have it in the palm of your hand, your thumbs are pressed up here. They're forced up here, unless you've got tiny little thumbs, which means you're kind of forced to scooch it up, and you're going to have real trouble. I really don't like it, I have to say. You're going to have real trouble trying to navigate. So that to me is an issue, and I think the answer is fairly clear. You're going to need a Pro controller. The other problem there, of course, is that if you're going to need one Pro controller and this isn't really adequate and you want to play 2-player games, you're going to need 2 of these. And that's going to get very expensive. But the other thing that sticks in my mind with this is when I was playing, I found when I went from this and I went from using it as a tablet to playing with the Pro controller, I found that some of the button placements were a bit off. So for instance, if you look here, the capture button and the home button are down here on the Joy-Cons, whereas they're just below the plus and minus button on the Pro controller. And on the Pro controller, it's a much better layout. What I found though was when I was in game, I had an issue where I was so used to using the Pro controller, when I went back to using it as a tablet, I was having problems finding certain buttons. And so, as I say, part of that is to do with the layout and the way it's done ergonomically. And I know that Nintendo had to make compromises here, but I did find it quite difficult. And you know, when you're playing a game long term, you get very used to the layout and you don't even think about it. And I found that I kept having to think about it. All these compromises add up to a system that it isn't perfect. It's very difficult from a control point of view to get your head round and to just jump into a game and just enjoy it. It's fine with this. I've got no problems with this controller other than the digital triggers. But when you start using this or you start using it as a tablet, it's a bit more difficult. So I don't know. What do you guys think? Do you think it's worth getting a Pro controller? Do you think these compromises were worth making in order to have, you know, a tablet that you could take on the go and a system that you could use at home? Or do you think it's a kind of half-assed attempt at both? I tend to lean towards the latter, but you guys might think differently. So come down in the comments, let us know what you think. Tell me, will you be buying a Switch? I know some of you won't be buying a Switch, and I know some of you in the comments have already bought a Switch and have similar problems with it to me. But let me know in the comments, will you be buying a Switch? Have you got a Switch? Are you getting a Pro controller? And if you're not getting a Pro controller, or you haven't got a Pro controller, how are you getting on with this? And in the meantime, I'm going to drink this. And I'll speak to you guys again soon. Bye.